What's up, guys? Welcome back. I am Disc Golf Bro, and today we're going to be talking about mastering the Hyzer Flip. Now, if there are any of you here who have no idea what a Hyzer Flip is, go ahead and click on this video here and we'll get you caught up to speed. First, we're going to talk about how to Hyzer Flip into a headwind and a tailwind. Next, we're going to talk about how weight might affect the stability of your disc. And lastly, my favorite tip of them all, we're going to talk about something called overclocking, which is something that disc golf pros do all the time, and I'm going to let you in on a little secret about it. All right, so let's quickly talk about wind. First things first, I would not recommend throwing a Hyzer Flip into a crosswind whatsoever, and here's why. If you guys are going to act as the wind today, you guys are blowing towards me, and I'm throwing this direction, as I line up to throw a Hyzer Flip, the disc is going to be released at this angle, okay? And that's going to leave all this surface for the wind to push and pretty much, move that disc out of its normal line. Vice versa, if I'm throwing this direction and you guys are blowing across this way, I expose the disc this much, all this surface area is going to get pushed that direction. Whereas on a headwind, right, the only surface area that's affected is this area here, right? So the disc is still going to be affected by the wind, but not nearly as severe as when it's exposed on that angle. Let's talk about Hyzer flipping into a headwind. Now, headwinds, or wind that's blowing directly at you, is always going to make your disc more understable. So for right-handed players like myself who are facing a headwind, I know that that disc, once it comes out of my hand, is going to turn more to the right because of that headwind. So knowing that, we're going to attack it in a different way. So if normally I would throw my Hyzer flips at about this angle and I have a headwind, I'm going to want to account for that extra instability, and I'm going to add a little bit more Hyzer angle, and that's going to account for that extra bit of turn. Just adding a little bit of angle, I think, is a good solution for lower winds, but the second it starts getting higher and higher, you're going to want to grab something that's more stable, or even something that's a little bit faster. So if I typically would throw a negative 1.52, which is the Maverick I have, I'd probably jump up to something like this 0.2 Athena, something that's pretty straight, but if I have a little bit of a headwind, it'll give me a little bit of flip that I need and go straight. Now, typically this is not an understable disc, but because I have such a strong headwind, I kind of have to start dipping into that overstable range to get it to do what I want. If I'm throwing with a tailwind behind me, I know that my discs are all going to travel more to the left. So knowing this, I've got two options. First option is, if I typically throw it about this angle, I'm going to take off a little bit of that Hyzer angle and just reduce it a touch to account for the fact that it's not going to flip as much, and I'm going to need a little bit of extra help to push it to the right, and changing that angle is going to do that. Now, this solution, again, only works for the wind that isn't as severe, right? Somewhere in the 5 to 7 mile an hour range. If it's worse than that, then you're just going to have to grab a disc that's much more understable. So really quickly, I want to talk about weight. If you're throwing lighter discs, so something that's maybe like in the 150 to 160 range, you are going to notice that your discs are going to be more likely to turn.
Here's a great example where I'm throwing two sharks, one that's 180 grams on the left and the other that's 147 grams on the right, and you can see just how much more Hyzer angle I have to put on the lighter disc to get it to flip up to flat and have a similar flight, but even then it's still much more understable.
The last thing I want to talk about is overclocking. Now, overclocking is really similar to Hyzer flipping, but it's a little different. Now, with overclocking, it works like this. I'll take a mid-range or a fairway, anything that I would say is like a 4 to, I'd say maybe a 9 speed would probably work for this. And essentially what you're doing is you're taking a lower speed disc, like this Buzz, for example, which is a 5 speed, and I'm throwing it as if I'm throwing a 10 speed. Now, when I do this, it's going to cause the disc to be more understable. The disc isn't used to being thrown that fast, and its only response is to turn.
Now, a great example of overclocking would be Calvin Heimberg throwing his trusty eagle. On the left side of your screen, you can see the flight path for the eagle normally, but as we can see here, Calvin's going to rip into this thing and throw it much faster than it's meant to be thrown, and you can see just how much more turn he's able to get out of it, and he shapes this shot beautifully. Here's a good demonstration of just how power can affect the flight of the disc. So here's a Buzz SS, 25% power, performs very stable. At 50% power, which is about how you would throw a disc like that, it goes very straight, little bit of fade at the end. But again, as we overclock that disc, you're going to see it go pretty straight in the beginning, but because it's still got so much extra spin, it's going to continue to turn all the way through that flight.
All right, I'm gonna quickly do a Q&A with you guys. For those of you who are really excited about the last video, wanted to talk about more of y'all's questions. Elderberry said, you should also bring up on Hyzer, you need to change your aim point because it pushes right early out of the hand. So you kind of want to account for that flip to happen. I like to aim a little bit up to the left, and that's going to allow it to flip and then kind of turn into that center line that you're looking for. Eham had a question about the end of the video. What was the point you were making about his back foot? He released the disc as his back foot leaves the ground. This is just for clarification. So Eham, this is a good question. This is something that when I was learning Hyzer flips, I struggled with this a lot because I was trying to add too much power, and I would notice that all the disc would turn over. If you're noticing your back foot is traveling around like this in front of your plant foot, chances are good that your disc is also going to fly that same direction. So it's really just more about being cautious of not over-rotating with your lower half, because that's going to allow you to keep the disc going straight as opposed to having it turn over because of this over-rotation. But Namasar asked what a Hyzer flip was after watching the video. He seemed to be confused about what a Hyzer is. Pretty much the best way that I can explain it is if this is throwing the disc flat, a Hyzer is when the disc is down like this. Okay, so my thumb, right, the direction that my thumb is pointing, that edge of the disc is going down, and that's going to be a Hyzer. If it's up, right, the edge of that disc is facing up, that's now an anhyzer. So those are all the questions that we received on the first video. If you guys are still having any struggles with Hyzer flips, feel free to scroll down and leave us a comment, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.